Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now Show, the voice of the DSO industry. Kim Larson and Bill Newman talk to industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. Visit groupdentistrynow.com for more DSO analysis, news, and events. Looking for a job or have a job to fill? Visit joindso.com. We hope you enjoy today's show.
Welcome everyone to the Group Dentistry Now Show. I'm Bill Newman and I'd like to welcome our guest, Darci Wingard. And you all probably know Darci. She's been in the dental industry for a while and certainly has a lot of experience in the DSO space. But if you don't know her, I'm going to read her bio off. So welcome first off, Darci, to the Group Dentistry Now Show. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Great. So Darci is the Planmeca Strategic Account Manager for the West, and she's going to talk a little bit about what she does in that role. Relatively recent role for Darci, but like I mentioned before, she's been in the DSO space for the last 12 years in dental sales and business development and partner relations. She joined Planmeca as the Strategic Account Manager for the Western region right in the middle of the pandemic, right in June. So probably an interesting way to get into the DSO space, but specifically on the equipment side of things. She spent 4 years at a little company called Henry Schein, and she had multiple roles there within the Special Markets Division, including Director of National Accounts, Manager of Group Strategy and Development, and Director of Alternative Purchasing Channels. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So before Henry Schein, Darci worked in the startup technology space in the Bay Area, leading in sales growth to position the company for a major acquisition. And she stayed on to continue driving business development there. But she spent quite a bit of time in the dental space, and it's good to have you on the show, Darci. So tell us a little bit about your current role. I know it's relatively new to you, but what are you doing for Planmeca?
Yeah, so thank you for the very warm introduction and kind words. So Planmeca, right during this entire COVID with the industry change and some of the restrictions and everything going on, I was brought on at the beginning of June to join Planmeca, and Planmeca, has always primarily had a real strong focus on our private practice dentists, and so what we have noticed is we are seeing a lot of the shifting within the industry and going into more of a group focused segment. You're seeing a lot of consolidation. So it was something that we needed to be a little more proactive about as a company and focus on those emerging markets. So emerging DSOs, large DSOs, national customers, some of the CHCs, kind of non-traditional models as well, study clubs, study groups. So we knew there's a big market there that we could really be a force to be reckoned with. They had brought on an entire dedicated team just to support this segment of the strategic accounts or group business. So I am the strategic accounts manager of the West. I have a counterpart, Greg Petrowski, in the East. So we do cover a whole national spread into all North America. Here at Planmeca, again, now just focused on these strategic accounts and non-traditional models.
That's great. And like I mentioned before, Darci has a background with Henry Schein. So we're gonna talk about her the relationship with a manufacturer, specifically equipment, and how you can work with your distribution partner. And then what does that mean to the DSO, both on the emerging group side and some of the larger platforms as well. So I'll start this off. It's great that you have a background on both sides. I think that's relatively unique. I mean, I'm sure there's some other folks out there that have that, but you've got not only the DSO background, but then you have it on distribution and now on the manufacturing side of things. So I'll ask you this. We've done a couple of surveys. We actually just completed one in July of this year, and it's a DSO procurement survey. And we had a really nice response this year. Last year, we just focused on North America, and we had, I think, about 28 platforms that responded. This year, we had 65, and we actually expanded it beyond the North American borders. So we had, I think, 20 of the platforms were from Europe, and some were in the UK, and the rest were North America. But one of the questions we ask is, what's most important to you when making a decision to have a product or a service on or not on your formulary. And very similar to last year, the responses were quality was number one. Number two was pricing, and then number three was that support, right? So, or the service behind it. So, how can you support the product once we actually onboard it? Whether it's education or whether it's a service aspect. So, that being said, and we're talking specifically about dental equipment manufacturers and dealers in the process, how can you foster that alignment? Because when we ask the question, we ask the clinical board, right? And then we're also asking the procurement people as well, because they're both involved in the process. So how do you really work together, both as an equipment manufacturer and as a dealer, and kind of foster that compliance? So how do you make it important for both the clinical, which tends to be more, the efficiencies, the quality, and then of course you've got procurement, which is a little bit more on the price side or the cost of acquisition?
Yeah, no, great question. I think it's a delicate dance, right? And I think it's a vote of confidence that you need to have between both the distribution company, the dealer, as well as the manufacturer. And again, especially in equipment, right? I think consumables is, a very different type of model, but when you are talking about technology and equipment, you do bring in that clinical aspect, right? Where you do need to have the board weigh in on a lot of things to make sure that we are following through with the proper standard of care. But I think the easy question, I think where we start is it's all about exploratory and discovery, in my opinion, in my past experience. I think it takes the dealer partner and the distribution team there to really get to know their customer and who they're working with, and whether that's a small group, an emerging group, a franchise, large group, and really understand that practices or that DSOs or that group's goals, their business needs, what that long-term and that short-term plan looks like. And if it is something like technology and equipment, where you are going to need some of that digital workflow to be brought into the office, you're going to need to make sure that you are working closely to understand those needs of that customer. And then I think the dealer can partner with those manufacturers and bring in some offerings, multiple manufacturers and multiple offerings to that customer to say, hey, here's what we think is going to best fit for you. And it's going to be something where internally the C-suite or the clinical team of that DSO is going to have to sit through and kind of lay their cards out and say, this is what we're looking for. This is what we need. And then also the distribution partner is going to be able to bring in their expertise, their knowledge, their background of what they say. Here's what we're seeing across, the industry. Here are what other CHCs or institutions or other groups are utilizing today. And here's why they've selected, manufacturer A, B, or C. And then I think it is important to narrow it down. I think if you bring too much to the table at once, it's almost too much options. It could get very confusing. So I think a narrowed selection of, 2 to 3 max should be brought in for that initial offering. And I think that C-suite team is the ones that are going to review to make sure that it checks all the boxes. And then it comes down to, like you said, cost, right? Cost and quality. But then I think the post-sale process is also very important. I know a lot of these groups are not just looking for, the equipment or the technology. They're looking for a true partner. And when I say true partner, they want to know that someone's going to be there for them today through that entire vetting process, as well as once that decision is made, that they are there for the implementation, the training, the continuing education. You and I both know that a lot of these groups, there can be a lot of turnover. So they want to make sure that their team is prepared and they have a partner there in that manufacturer, as well as the distribution partner that can help them long-term through all their needs once that selection has been made.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. So let's, some of our audience, so we've got some of the big platforms, the large groups out there that have a lot of structure in place when it comes to formulary and, a large clinical board and several people in their procurement department. What about the emerging groups? I have 2 or 3 locations and I may or may not have a, super sophisticated formulary. When it comes to equipment, and making decisions like that, what are they really, how do you start? What would you recommend? Again, your experience on the distribution side and now on the, the manufacturer side, what would you recommend? I mean, you did make a great point about, hey, don't bring too many options in or you'll get overwhelmed, but how do you even start the process when if I'm going to add another 3 or 4 locations, maybe a couple are de novo, a couple are, maybe need the equipment upgraded. How would I start?
Yeah, I mean, again, goes back to discovery. I mean, I would tap in. You have your distribution partners there as consultants. There should be an amazing value add and a resource to these groups or DSOs, or if, like you said, you're a smaller group, you're looking at expanding, tap into them. I would really ask them some of their experience and what they think and what they see within the industry. They have that firsthand experience. They're working, I mean, with Henry Schein, who I worked with. I mean, they really coined and pioneered the entire kind of emerging group and strategic accounts, that group practice, that entire segment. So, I mean, they have the data, they have the statistics, they know which partners that they can team up with well. But I think another thing that you need to look at is the scalability. So for instance, like with Planmeca, I mean, we have a breadth of innovative equipment technology offerings, integrated technology. And so I think it's kind of like the whole phrase, you crawl, walk, and run, right? So if you're looking at, let's say, a 3-office location, and some of the offices maybe have some 2D imaging, but their standard of care now is they want to get up to the 3D. It's important that they know that, hey, someone like Planmeca can help them grow. They can help them with the 2D. Majority of our 2D are upgradable to go to 3D, or you start with 3D. And then our software, Remexis, it's open platform. We play nicely in the sandbox. So that's another thing to look at. If you're going to do maybe a couple de novos or builds from the ground up, or you're looking at acquiring, you might not know what these other practices might be utilizing today, what equipment or technology they have. So knowing that you're picking a manufacturer on the equipment technology side that has that upgradability, that has an entire suite of products to look at, and that everything's plug and play, right? So having that open architecture, having a software that can help them plug and play and piecemeal into whatever technology is being brought in, I think that would be something that they can feel confident about when choosing something like Planmeca.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point with the acquisitions, not having to worry so much about what it is they have from practice management platform, or whether their technology might be a bit different. So yeah, great advice. So what about, again, back to that dealer equipment manufacturer relationship? How can they work together to mitigate the formulary selection process? Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. From procurement meetings and budgets and savings.
Yeah, I mean, it stops at the dollar. I think that's what everyone's looking at, especially now with the current climate of times. But yeah, I mean, I think once, the clinical team or the C-suite team has said, I think this is the direction we're going. I think any whether you're working with a small group, meaning you're 3 locations, maybe 4, maybe under 10, or you look at the big guys that are 100 plus. I think formularies are undervalued in the fact that it helps streamline things across the board. If you're a small group or a large group, especially when it comes to procurement management teams. And if you don't have a procurement management team, just to be fiscally responsible. If you are a practice and saying, hey, I want to look at, these certain composites or consumables, but again, keeping it down to 2 manufacturers, and even on equipment technology side, depending on what you're looking at, again, keeping it narrow to 2 or 3, because we don't want to dilute any type of offering too. So, and that kind of, I think, keeps some guidelines in place too, with the affiliate groups or locations underneath that group umbrella or franchise buying group, whatever it might be, right? It really helps those members say, I'm able to stay a little bit more competitive. I know that I'm going to be getting, a fair cost when I'm looking at these types of products within this type of manufacturing pool. So I think that's what formularies essentially allow. It's creating that foundation of staying within certain parameters to help really drive purchasing behavior. And that purchasing behavior, once you see that shift, you're going to be able to see ultimate cost savings. And I think on the flip side, when you look as a manufacturer, if I know that I'm attached to these formularies, I know long term that I'm going to be able to get a little bit more sales within that customer focus or that customer group segment. That's going to allow me to maybe put a little bit more skin in the game and offer them some more, comfort in pricing, knowing that we have that long-term relationship because we are on that formulary, there's skin in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sure does. And maybe let's build on that from your experience on the formulary side of things. I hear different things from different manufacturers and distributors as far as the adherence to the formulary from different groups. So, sometimes there are promises made as far as being an exclusive or something like that. And then you realize that maybe there's some pricing that's offered and then there might be other equipment companies brought in or even other distributors brought in. What's your experience and what's the importance of really, once you create this formulary, to adhere to it?
No, you mentioned it. It's definitely challenging from my experience of working with multiple strategic accounts, groups, different types of dental partner organizations, non-traditional models. I would think that is the hardest challenge of internally for that C-suite team. And especially if you do not have like a procurement focused team that can really drive that purchasing behavior, it's extremely challenging to have all your members or your affiliate locations really adhere to that. I think if you do have that procurement focus and you do have a team, I know there's a lot of the larger groups that they will place all the purchase orders. They will actually place the orders for those groups to make sure that they adhere by the formulary so they don't break any type of formulary or contract restrictions that have been probably put together through agreements, and to make sure that they follow within the what's been promised to the dealer and the manufacturer to make sure that for the following years those savings stay in check. But yeah, I mean, it is hard. I think you're going to see a little bit probably tighter success with some of the smaller groups because they're easy to manage. I think when you're looking at reporting, it's easier to look at too. You can see the little shifts where you might see a practice going rogue or purchasing from a different type of manufacturer or off what's on formulary, what they'd call contract pricing. But yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge. I think education is key too. I think the more that these DSOs or these groups can communicate down. Another thing are any type of procurement software systems, right? That sometimes it's like they call e-catalogs or contract pricings where it's literally restricted. They upload a formulary in and it says, this is your formulary. These are your products that we have signed off on, whether it's clinical, whatever. And these are the products that you have to purchase from or buy from. There's no way for them to go rogue through those type of systems. Or like I said, even if you're buying through henryschein.com directly through the distribution channel, they can, make it to where there's restrictions of what they're buying and it narrows down the breadth of the products that they're able to see before purchasing.
Right. Here's another question for you. As far as specifically with equipment, is there something that should be considered? Because again, when we go back to that first question that I asked you, and that really going back to the survey that we came up with where it was quality, pricing, but then that service or support. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of the service and support, and maybe even a little bit of what Planmeca provides, and is that built into an agreement, or because you can have a great piece of equipment, some great technology, But if you don't know how to use it, or you don't have the service to back it up when something goes wrong, doesn't really mean much. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
No, 100%. So, I mean, with Planmeca, especially like culture's king, we pride ourselves on three main core competencies of culture, community, and concept. And with us being a private, people aren't aware, Planmeca is one of the largest privately owned equipment and technology companies in the industry. And I think that is something that we take great pride in the fact that it lets us be agile and we can move very quickly. So one thing when you're looking at groups or large DSOs, whatever it might be, we have that ability to really pivot quickly and customize some things that you might not be able to get with a different type of manufacturer. So again, with my experience with really sitting in with some of these larger strategic customers, whether it's on the national side, large groups, whether it's between, 20 or 40, and they're just local DSOs or they span across regional regions. One thing that we really want to make sure that they know is their demands, as we know, are going to be maybe a little bit higher than a single private practice. They're going to have different needs. And we want them to know that, hey, we are here to support them in that post-sale process. We have the dedicated field team for technical support, on-site support. We have the remote login. We have what we call our support on-site. And then everything here through our dedicated, we have online channels, chat feature, phone. I mean, anything you can think of, we have it. But again, on the training and education side, we offer so much. We have our facility in Hoffman Estates, right outside Chicago. That is our US headquarters. And then we host tons of trainings there, hands-on workshops. And again, everything's customized. If you are one of those larger groups, you can come in, bring in your team, and we can do something exclusive just for you. Excellent.
Yeah, that's certainly good to know. Let's talk a little bit as we kind of work through the selection process. Back to dealer and manufacturer. What forces of influence are available for both the dealer and the manufacturer during the selection process? You talk a little bit about a balanced relationship and that type of thing, kind of working hand in hand, the dealer and the manufacturer. What should some of these DSOs do as they start to evaluate the technologies? And it always goes back to patient care, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I kind of go a little rogue here, but or I'm jumping ahead, but I think trials and pilot testing is probably the best way for some of these groups and even smaller groups, even single location, to really vet technology today. Things are changing and moving so fast that I think that is honestly the best way to get that confidence. If I'm a group practice and I'm looking at implementing intraoral scanning or CAD CAM or even 3D across all of my 100+ locations, I want to make sure that I'm vetting out properly and I've field tested, right? I've put maybe 1 or 2 or 3 different units in different locations, in different regions, different states, to where that we have the actual affiliate teams with hands-on, and they're actually using the machines, they're using the technology, they're using the equipment in day-to-day with their patients, whether that trial is a 60-day pilot, 90-day, whatever it might be. And it might be good to test a couple manufacturers. I would probably limit it to just 2, but that way you really get to see firsthand experience, because we all know that we can sit there and provide an amazing presentation, and we can say, here's where we are clinically. We have all these great features, proprietary information, but until those groups can really have that technology or those units in the field, utilizing day to day. And then if something does go wrong, I think that's what they need to look at, right? Technology is glitchy. It's never going to be a perfect process, but it's how that distribution team or that distribution partner, as well the manufacturer, works together and how quickly they can get things back up and running. And if something does go down, just as I was talking to you about Planmeca, we have that SOS, the on-site training. We can virtually tap in and we can work directly with the distribution dealer's tech team to get stuff up and running that day. So again, it's making sure that you have that partner that's going to be there with you through that testing pilot. And that's probably the best way to do it. Is I'd highly recommend doing some of the pilot trials before you really narrow it down to a couple to make that final decision.
Would you say that's pretty much standard protocol now with larger platforms, or even the smaller, again, kind of thinking of the emerging groups that might not, really have had to do this before at scale? Do you find that a lot of the groups are doing that, where they're going to take 2 or 3 locations and say, okay, we've got 60, 90 days. And then we all kind of get back together, talk about, what our experience was like. And then is that pretty standard now, or are you just hit or miss?
I think it's becoming more of a standard. I mean, I think it just depends on, again, what that group is looking for and what the end result is. But I mean, if I was in their position and there is availability to pilot test, and you can actually take that scanner in your hand or utilize that 3D machine and have it in the office for a couple months and really trying it out with the patients, I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, this is going to be able to help you with product functionality. You get to look at practice workflow, the needs and requirements that may be needed there that you might not even thought of, performance and satisfaction measurements, real-time reporting data. And then again, the training and support, all that post-sale stuff that you don't usually think about that will come into effect. And then the implementation and training, that's a huge one. You get those, it allows the groups and those DSOs to kind of get a taste of what that onboarding experience looks like, that implementation, those site surveys that needs to be done through the distribution team, as well with the manufacturer to get those sites ready to implement that type of technology, especially if they've never utilized that technology before. And then again, at Planmeca, I think we're really confident in our technology. The performance rates extremely under the strenuous conditions with beta testing, vigorous testing that's proven our units to outperform some of the competition. We've created, again, special clinical team dedicated just for the strategic account space and special needs or demands that they might need.
And you touched on something else, which is, I think, pretty important, is you talked a lot about remote logins and a lot of the training that can be done virtually now. And of course, with COVID, and there's probably more people leaning on those types of technologies now, that virtual communication. Do you see a lot more adoption of that recently, where a lot of the practices are starting to use that type of remote login, or where Planmeca is able to do some diagnostic work?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to bring people into the practices.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's a 50-50. I think, again, sign of the times in the current climate today. Yes, you're going to see a lot more virtual needs and virtual aid for remote login, especially when it comes to training. You're going to want more of the webinar remote access that can be provided. But, I think it's also going to be positive virtually for webinars and some of that online training. And those type of vehicles that are provided when you are large, when you're a super large DSO, of getting multiple people together at once, that requires no travel through any type of training or continuing education there. But I still think, hands-on is going to be the best experience. And just depending everyone's comfort level. But I still think that some in-person training, where you actually have that type of education and learning and the practice, is always going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, we've done our test pilot, right? We've decided that okay, so maybe we've got 2 or 3, right? You said 2, so we limited it to two options. How do we come up with a final decision? Like, what's the process after that? We field tested it. We kind of had our meetings. Take us through what makes sense there.
Yeah, I think, again, you look at value add. And I think once you've done your pilot testing, you've done that initial exploratory discovery where, the distribution dealer as well as manufacturers have come and said, here are the offerings or the options. Once you have that clinical board sign off and they've done their proper vetting process of, this is what we're looking for. Again, all the boxes are checked. Now we've had a couple of our affiliates pilot test beta. They have now taken results back of what's important to them. And again, I think there's multiple things that they have to look at, and every group is going to rate things a little bit different. As you said in the beginning, right? It's, quality, price, the support. Again, it comes to someone that's going to be that true partner for them, that's going to be there to really help those DSOs really grow over time and be flexible. Someone that's going to be able to provide something a little bit more customized to these groups to better support their affiliate needs. But yeah, I mean, once you've made that final selection process and you've gone through the vetting, which can be an expensive process. I mean, I think it can take months to really get to where you're going to go, because I think it's an investment too. You have to look at investing in the practice, and that's what technology and your equipment going to do. You're able to bring in a different type of, patient procedures, increasing that per patient production by bringing in a cone beam, where you're going to have a better standard of care there. But again, I think once you do that pilot and that initial vetting, then it comes down to, I think, what is the best actual partner. And I mean that. I think it comes down to choosing a partner for that final decision.
Yeah, and I think that's good. And let's maybe build on that support side of it again. I know when we go back to that survey that we did 2 years in a row, and the answers came out almost identical, where it was, again, quality, price, but real close to price was that support, which with equipment, and maybe I'm going to miss something, so make sure that you catch me, but support can mean a lot of things. So you've got the technology support, right? You've got the sales support on the front end to make sure that they know what the different options are. With technology, it can be pretty daunting. And then you've also got that after sales, almost the service, right? If I've got an issue, something breaks, what am I going to do? Is Planmeca there? Is the distribution partner there to kind of back us up if we're down, with some of our technology? So that to me seems pretty important as well, and should certainly go into the process. What are your thoughts on the importance of support?
100%, 100%. And I think one thing that Planmeca has done very well is we keep a focus on that entire service and support and that post-sale process. And there's no added fees with any of it. So everything that we were talking about, the chat feature, you can call in, online remote support, continuing education, and the training, all of that comes into play. We don't have additional subscription fees or, for warranty. It comes, even a lot of our stuff is a standard 5-year warranty. So that comes inclusive with a lot of the products. But yeah, I mean, definitely the education, the training piece. And again, when it comes to saying like a partner, that's what you want to be looking at. Who are those manufacturer equipment partners that can actually provide that continued training, can help you if you are looking at CBCT and going into more of 3D imaging and making that standard of care across all of your locations. Once you have those images, how should people be reading them? What should they be looking at, right? So those are the things that we're going to be able to provide, that continued level of education to make sure that once they've implemented this technology, that they're able to use it daily and they understand the way they're using it and the way they should be using it. And again, this comes down to the clinical board really embracing the technology advantages. And again, with Planmeca, we have a lot of proprietary, different type of options and algorithms that we put into our machines, like our ultra low dose, our calm feature, and that really helps recruit quality, the tech savviness for dentists, and something they should be looking at when they are picking technology, whether it's 3D, even when it comes to scanning or CAD CAM, whatever it might be.
So you mentioned a couple things. This will be the last question for you. But as far as we talk a lot about technology, Planmeca is a technology company. What are the new technologies that DSOs and clinicians are looking for? I mean, is it 3D? Is it the scan? Is it? You talked about low dose a little bit and the importance of that, and just what are you being asked about now? Where's the interest level lie? I'm sure it probably goes to certain new technologies that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely when it comes to some of the cone beam and the 3D imaging, I think you have a lot of the groups that have invested in a lot of the 2D, but you are seeing a lot of people now looking at 3D and saying, it is the standard of care. And now we need to be implementing this throughout, our various affiliations. And then it's just showing like we're able to give that better patient, better care of the patient when you're looking at a larger cone beam image in a different field of view. But the ultra low dose that we offer, that's going to be something that I think is kind of like a keyword that you're hearing a lot of people talk about is, are we compromising any type of image quality when we're talking about low dose? And we're not with Planmeca. We are the imaging leader when it comes to the 2D and 3D, and that ultra low dose is still going to let those practices be rest assured that we're not compromising, again, any image quality for that ultra low dose. And we want to make sure that the patients know that they're safe coming in and that ultra low dose regarding radiation is there. And then Calm. If you've not heard of the Calm technology, that's another thing that we have added into all of our 3D machines. So it literally corrects any type of movement. So even if you are a patient, a small child moving, or a patient with Parkinson's, I mean, it's almost foolproof. You can take a proper image. Yep, 100%. Again, and so these are some of the proprietary things that we have into all of our 3D machines, again, primarily on the 3D side. And these are all type of things that we are hearing a lot more about. We're seeing a lot of interest in it, especially in the strategic accounts and the emerging DSO space.
Excellent. Well, that's all we have for today. But Darci Wingard, thank you for giving us some insight. It's nice to talk to you. You've got the great background on the distribution side and now on the equipment side with Planmeca, and appreciate the insight and maybe some tips and tricks for some of the emerging groups as far as, hey, starting to build out our formulary, what's the process look like, and specifically when it comes to equipment. But that's all we've got for today. And Darci, thanks again. Appreciate you joining us. And until next time, I'm Bill Newman with the Group Dentistry Now Show.
The Group Dentistry Now Show has listeners across North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. If you like our show, subscribe today and please tell your colleagues about us.